The Dungeon of Black Company. Episode 1. Welcome to the world of corporate grunts. Kinji Ninomiya stands at the top of his penthouse looking scornfully upon the common folk. He brags about his wealth until a portal opens up beneath his feet, plunging him and his pride into an alternate world. A world where demi-humans prevail. A world where Ninomiya is forced to toil the mines of dead mold just like the people he'd looked down on. He's down to his last 10,000 gold when the coin escapes his grasp and rolls down the alley. Ninomiya chases it, but the coin disappears. He discovers a secret passage to the third floor but can't go on his own. He recruits Wanibe, a timid demi-human, and they both go on a perspective tour to go deeper into the dungeon for higher grade demonite. They go through the secret passage, and as anticipated, they gather enough demonite. Before they can leave, they're attacked by a monster called Rim. Ninomiya kicks Mr. Wanibe forward, using him as bait. As he's about to get eaten, Ninomiya proposes a deal to the monster. He proposes to get Rim food tastier than any human if she chooses to protect them on their missions to gather demonite. To his surprise, Rim agrees and transforms into a human girl. The monster eats more than Ninomiya makes, but this inconvenience only makes him work harder. On one of their missions, Ninomiya comes across a sleepwalker's staff and uses it to enslave the other miners to do his bidding. He keeps overworking them until one day the staff shatters and all the miners come to their senses. They beat up Ninomiya and abandon him in the mine. Episode 2. An unanticipated encounter. Ninomiya doesn't get any pity from his coworkers when he shows up with crutches. The progress they've made on the third floor impresses the higher-ups. This causes Ninomiya and Wanibe to get transferred to Exploration Division Group 8. Their duties entail serving Group 3 Elite until they drop from exhaustion. Wanibe laments about the grunt work but trusts Ninomiya to come up with a manipulative speech to raise his spirits. Ninomiya turns his gaze to Wanibe, only to see him being strangled by a tentacled beast residing in a treasure chest. Wanibe gets injured in the process, and Ninomiya is fined for the items he saved his life with. Unfortunately, he's also been asked to cover for Wanibe's absence from work. Ninomiya heads into the dungeon the next day and bumps into Krutz, a member of Group 3 Elite, running for his life. He joins him in running as dungeon ants chase after them. They manage to get to the surface with their lives, but the ants are not far behind. In a moment of desperation, Ninomiya, Krutz, and the store owner drink potions that transform them into dungeon ants. They're sealed in the dungeon by the higher-ups, and so Ninomiya births the plan to turn the dungeon ants against their queen. It actually works. Ninomiya leads the rebellion against the queen, but she's not threatened by him. She seeks to attack Ninomiya but is stopped by Rim. The queen retreats out of fear for the monster. Rim doesn't care what she eats and tries to consume all the dungeon ants. Thanks to Ninomiya, she doesn't. The ants feel indebted to him for saving their lives, and they bow to Ninomiya. He only sees a chance to utilize their numbers, so he starts a Dungeon Black Company to overpower the Raizaha Mining Corporation. Episode 3. Fun at the Corporate Training Trip. Ninomiya and the rest of the crew are sent to Pig Island to learn a better work ethic. There, they test their experience and their stamina. They're made to go days without food, and even this doesn't impress their drill sergeant. He moves on to mental training, where he beats the living daylight out of defaulters. The training still doesn't catch on. The Black Mage Division is employed to brainwash all crew members to work tirelessly. This doesn't work on Ninomiya because he consumes confusion grass to fight off the brainwashing effects. Ninomiya snaps out of it as they leave the Pig Isle and helps Wanibe do the same. The mages blow up the island under the influence of confusion grass. When they get back, they meet Kinoshiya, the hero. She hits Wanibe playfully, and this sends him to the emergency room, leaving her alone with Ninomiya. She forces him to follow her down to the dungeon to boost his work morale. There, she defeats a Hecatonkari in one swoop of her sword, expecting Ninomiya to be impressed. But when she turns to him, he's in cahoots with a dungeon ant. Shia tries to kill it, but Ninomiya quickly summons Rim to subdue her. The hero is tied down but doesn't give up, so Ninomiya and Wanibe bring down a camera. He takes incriminating pictures of the hero and monsters together. He goes on to threaten to leak them if she doesn't work extra hard for the Black Dungeon Company. Episode 4. Crazy Death March. Debt collectors corner Ninomiya, giving him a month to repay 5 million gold. As Shia tries to teach him and Wanibe how to fight, his only takeaway is that monsters can grow back body parts. Ninomiya immediately opens up a monster farm where he sells valuable body parts and pays off his debt in no time. Belza has a meeting with other members of Raizaha Corporation to talk about the Death March. They fear the return of all defeated monsters but cherish the return of more demons. Back in the dungeon, Shia and Ninomiya run into a Majin, which is a monstrously powerful beast. Shia tries to fight it, but keeps losing. She attempts to send Ninomiya to the surface, but he sends the beast up there instead. The beast destroys everything in its path till it gets back to Shia, but this time, Ninomiya tries to subdue it in a cement trap. Plan A fails and he tries to burn it alive in a pool of monster goop. They try other means, but the Majin regenerates itself. Rim saves the day as she bites the head of the Majin clean off. The ground opens up suddenly and swallows Ninomiya and Rim into it. Episode 5. Transfer. Ninomiya is confused when he awakes to see a girl begging him to save their city. He makes Rim tear a hole in the wall and notices he's not in Emuria but in Marcia. Zazzle, the leader of Marcia, introduces the strange lady as Ranga and explains how the people of his city have been cooped up underground. He tells Ninomiya that he's the prophesied Messiah and that a way back to Japan will open up when he saves Marcia. Ninomiya immediately sets out with Ranga and Rim in search of the Demon Lord. He notices that they're actually 200 years into the future of Emuria. Ranga gets the location wrong and makes them invade the quarters of General Ant. It's a welcome surprise when General Ant turns out to be a dungeon ant from Ninomiya's past. They sit to eat and the ant seeks Ninomiya's help to restructure the workforce. He agrees, thus siding with the Demon Lord. Episode 6. There is a strong shadow, there is much light. A group refers to themselves as the Three Ravens who set out to bring down Ninomiya. Power Ash tries sending monsters, but they're subdued immediately. Rugini tries to overcome agricultural impossibility, but Ninomiya conquers yet again. Finally, Zeke's Holler sneaks onto the property to threaten Ranga with bits of his past. As soon as he discovers Ranga is a boy, he's thrown off. Rim uses this opportunity to kick him off the property. Ranga falls into a weird trance after getting shot in the head by a huge robot. Lucky for him, Ninomiya is around to revive him. Episode 7. Return to work. Ninomiya finally meets the Demon Lord. The only problem is that she looks too much like Rim. She keeps referring to Rim as her sister, but Rim has no recollection of this. She has to attack them before they remember her as the Majin Rim defeated in the dungeon. The Majin explains how the fate of the world lies in ruin because of the Raizaha and their greed. She tells Ninomiya about the original magic makers and how they'd made portals to move between dimensions and time. The master then offers Ninomiya two choices. One is a chance to go back to Japan, and the other is a chance to return in time to save the world from the Raizaha. Ninomiya chooses to go back, but for the most petty reason ever, to get even with Raizaha for making him work so much. Belza summons him upon his arrival and heaps debt on him. He just laughs it off. She goes on to render him homeless, but he just moves in with Shia. He couldn't care less. Later the next day, he's asked what his plan is. Ninomiya screams that he wants to form a party with everyone in the room. He plans to defeat the dungeon before Belza and get to the ruins first. Wanibe kills his buzz when he tells him how much harder the dungeons have become. Episode 8. Weapon of Mass Hysteria. Shia tells Ninomiya that he's at a mere level 5 and has to raise his level to at least 20 to be considered an adventurer. She trains him and Wanibe until they start shaking in their boots, literally. She moves on to train their magic power, but Ninomiya is not from Emuria and has no magic whatsoever. Rim and Ranga play pretend with Ninomiya's gun, and a desolate Ninomiya takes it from them in annoyance. The gun suddenly begins to speak. It asks Ninomiya to imprint his personal details. This otherworldly gun promises to protect Ninomiya and all his combat needs. The confidence he'd been searching for was finally here. Ninomiya leads the party to the dungeon the next day. He tries out the gun on the first two monsters to attack them. The gun absorbs mana from the environment and turns it into energy. The gun soon begins to absorb energy uncontrollably, rendering Ninomiya and his team half naked from its effects. Ninomiya tries to get rid of it, but it simply activates self-destruction while still attached to him. He's left with no choice but to accept the weapon. Episode 9. Silent Fortress. As they progress into the dungeon, they run into zombies. These zombies turn one of Ninomiya's group members, named Eldman, by whispering incantations in his ear. They try to blend in as zombies, but they fail, and the zombies begin to attack them, and one by one, they're defeated. Ranga uses the distraction to destroy the incantations written on the wall. They all snap out of it, turning into humans again. They notice Ninomiya has been abducted and go looking for him immediately. They find him shouting at a mage with a skeleton for a body. He tells his story about being a vengeful spirit and takes the blame for turning people into zombies. He's set free when he discovers the world is going in a stupid direction all on its own. Ninomiya meets Cindy, a shop owner in the dungeon. He helps her restructure her brand by rebranding her elixirs as dead cows. He lies about its contents and gets people addicted to it. Sooner than later, the elixir is shut down, and Ninomiya abandons Cindy to fend for herself. Episode 10. New Dungeon Paradise. Ninomiya and his party arrive on the 4th floor of the dungeon. He saves some of Belza's personnel, and they tell him everyone is stuck on that floor. True to their words, boulders encapsulated both entrances to the 5th and 3rd floors. They head back to the base of Group 3. Right at the entrance, Ninomiya is reunited with the dungeon Ant Queen. The queen came holding a child. This child is the Majin, the dungeon's replacement for a guardian. The Majin has a strong connection with the dungeon, and as things get worse within it, so does her health. Ninomiya comes up with a plan to save both the Majin and the dungeon, a plan he calls Dungeon Rebuild. Rim is left to look after the Majin, and she tries her best. None of her methods worked, though, until Ninomiya and the team corrected the errors in the dungeon's ecosystem. The Majin regains her health, and Rim names her Sky because that's what beauty is to her. Their joy is short-lived when the sky begins to cough again. Episode 11. Crash Evolution. There is something still wrong with the dungeon. It turns out the ruins of the 5th floor keep multiplying guardians. Ninomiya and Rim try to fight them off, but they keep coming. They finally create a strategy to destroy the source. Rim breaks apart the management manipulator in 2 strikes, and immediately, the guardians seize and multiply. The guards discover the door to the 6th floor, and they inform Ninomiya about it. He, in turn, approaches the euphoria without fear or hesitation. Everyone interprets this as being selfless when, in fact, it was the opposite. Ninomiya smiles maniacally as he absorbs the power of the ancient ancestors for himself. He uses this power to revolutionize the dungeon, turning it into an amusement park named Ninomiya Dungeon Land. His new business hits Raizaha Corporation, where it really hurts, sending their stock way below market. Ninomiya offers the corporation a chance to join his company, but Belza refuses him out of pride and selfish ambition. Episode 12. Good Day, Goodbye. Ninomiya suddenly gets arrested. He's charged with violations of exchange laws and demonet trading. All of this is, of course, Belza's doing. She continues to tear him down before the public and even goes as far as bringing false witnesses. It didn't help that Ninomiya wasn't entirely innocent, though. Detective Sari questions Ninomiya for a confession, but he stays silent. She even uses the more convincing method of torture, but he still doesn't budge. Meanwhile, his team pulls out a manual he'd kept for cases of emergency and starts working behind the scenes. A month passes, and Belza gets promoted to director at the Raizaha Mining Corporation shareholders meeting. She barely has time to gloat when the notion of making Ninomiya the CEO is put forward. Belza tries to fight it, but overwhelming evidence supporting Ninomiya is presented by his trusty team. In desperation, she exclaims that a criminal cannot be the CEO of any company. But just then, Ninomiya bursts through the doors as a free man. He wins the majority of the votes and becomes CEO of Raizaha Mining Corporation. All's well in Amoria again, all except Ninomiya's ambition. Wanibe thinks Ninomiya is acting weird, and thinks it's because he plans to return to Japan. They plan a farewell party for him, only for Ninomiya to tell them the actual plan. He sets a new challenge for himself and promises to take over all the dungeons in the world.